The text message came at 3:47 a.m. on November 15th, 2024. Just 12 words that would change everything. Your son Landon is dying. ICU. Methodist Hospital, Dallas.
Come now.
I stared at my phone screen in the darkness of my hotel room in Berlin, the words blurring as my hands started shaking.
No signature. No explanation.
Just cold, brutal facts delivered like a slap across the face. Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Her Real Stories. Whether you're part of our amazing family or you're brand new here, I'm so grateful you chose to spend your time with us today. If you love powerful stories about real people overcoming impossible situations, you're definitely in the right place. The flight from Berlin to Dallas felt like falling through space. 14 hours of airplane coffee and recycling the same terrible thoughts over and over. I kept checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for an update, dreading what I might find. The last time I'd spoken to Landon was 6 weeks ago, on October 3rd. He'd sounded tired but happy, telling me about how well the restaurant was doing and how excited he was about the holiday season coming up. They'd just hired 3 new servers and were booked solid through New Year's Eve. Everything seemed perfect in his world. When I landed at DFW Airport on November 16th at 11:23 a.m., Texas hit me like a wall of humidity and car exhaust. I didn't even go to my apartment. I threw my bags in the first taxi I could find and gave the driver one address, Methodist Hospital, Dallas. The whole ride there, I kept thinking about the conversation I'd had with Landon 6 weeks earlier. He'd been so excited about expanding the restaurant, maybe opening a second location. He and Celeste had been married for 2 years, and he kept talking about how grateful he was to have found someone who supported his dreams. Mom, Celeste believes in me in a way no one ever has, he'd said. She helps me see possibilities I never imagined. Those words felt like poison now, sitting in the back of that taxi, watching Dallas speed by through rain-streaked windows. The ICU smelled like bleach and broken dreams. Room 408. That's where I found my son, and nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Landon looked like he'd aged 20 years in 3 weeks. His skin was gray, his cheeks hollow, and machines were doing most of the work of keeping him alive. Tubes snaked from his arms, his nose, his chest. The steady beeping of monitors filled the room like a countdown clock. A nurse named Patricia came over when she saw me standing there, probably looking like I'd been hit by a truck. "Are you family?" she asked gently. "I'm his mother, Iris Calloway." Her face changed immediately. Not surprise, but something like relief, mixed with deep sadness. "We've been trying to reach someone for 6 weeks. He's been asking for you constantly." 6 weeks. My son had been dying for 6 weeks, and nobody had called me until last night. The hospital had my number. Celeste had my number. Someone should have called me the moment this started. "Where's his wife?" "Celeste." Patricia looked uncomfortable, the way people do when they have to deliver bad news. "Ma'am, we haven't seen her since the day he was admitted." She filled out the admission paperwork and left. Said she had some urgent business to handle and would be back later that evening. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. That was 6 weeks ago? "Yes, ma'am." She never came back. We tried calling her multiple times, but her phone goes straight to voicemail. We finally found her contact information in his emergency files this morning and decided we had to reach out. "What urgent business?" "I don't know, ma'am, but he keeps asking for both of you every time he wakes up. He seems very worried about her safety." I pulled up a chair next to Landon's bed and took his hand. It felt like paper in mine, all bones and dry skin. His wedding ring hung loose on his finger, too big now for his wasted frame. His eyes fluttered open around 2:15 p.m., and when he saw me, he tried to smile. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the machines. "You came." "Of course I came, baby. I'm here now." "Where's Celeste?" The question came out desperate, afraid. I keep asking for her, but the nurses won't tell me anything. Is she okay? Did something happen to her? Was there an accident? I squeezed his hand, my heart breaking at the hope and fear in his voice. I don't know, honey, but I'm going to find out. She was supposed to come back that first night. She promised she'd be back before bedtime, but she never came. And now I can't reach her at all. Tears were running down his cheeks. What if something terrible happened to her? What if she's hurt somewhere and can't call for help? The fact that he was worried about her, that even dying, he was more concerned about Celeste's well-being than his own situation, made me want to scream. But I kept my voice calm and steady. Landon, honey, have the doctors talked to you about your condition? His eyes got cloudy, the way they do when someone doesn't want to face reality. They said it's cancer.
Pancreatic.
But they're treating it. The doctors are hopeful. Celeste said she was researching experimental treatments, that she was going to find the best specialists in the country. I felt my heart sink even further. He was in denial about how sick he was, clinging to false hope that Celeste had apparently been feeding him before she disappeared. What exactly did the doctors tell you about your prognosis? They said it was serious, but that people beat cancer all the time. Celeste said she'd been talking to specialists who had new treatments that weren't available here. She said she was going to arrange for me to be transferred to a better hospital as soon as the paperwork went through. More lies. Even after abandoning him, Celeste had left him with false hope to cling to. Dr. Martinez pulled me aside around 4:30 p.m. He was young, maybe 35, with kind eyes and the worst news imaginable. Mrs. Calloway, I need to be frank with you. Your son has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It's extremely aggressive and has metastasized throughout his abdomen. We've been trying to help him understand the severity of his condition, but he seems to have been given some unrealistic expectations about treatment options. What do you mean? He keeps talking about experimental treatments and transfers to other hospitals. Someone told him there were cutting-edge therapies available that could cure him. We've tried to gently correct these misconceptions, but he's holding on to hope that these treatments exist. How long has he been sick? Based on his symptoms and the progression we're seeing, he's probably been dealing with this for 8 to 10 months. Pancreatic cancer is often called the silent killer because symptoms don't show up until it's very advanced. By the time he came to us, there was nothing we could do except manage his pain. 10 months. Celeste would have known something was seriously wrong. The weight loss, the fatigue, the stomach pain that Landon had probably attributed to stress from running the restaurant. How long does he have? If we're being completely honest, maybe a week.
2 at the most.
We're doing everything we can to keep him comfortable, but the cancer has spread too extensively for any treatment. Does he understand that? We've tried to explain it to him, but I think he's been told things that contradict our medical assessment. It's not uncommon for family members to have difficulty accepting a terminal diagnosis. I realized that Celeste hadn't just abandoned Landon. She'd left him with cruel false hope that was preventing him from accepting his situation and finding peace. I sat in that sterile hallway for a long time after Dr. Martinez walked away. My son was dying, clinging to lies his wife had told him before disappearing to live it up somewhere else. Something was very, very wrong here. I stayed with Landon until visiting hours ended at 8 p.m. He slept most of the time, the pain medication keeping him under, but when he was awake, he kept asking about Celeste. Where was she? Was she safe? Had there been an accident? Was she in another hospital somewhere? He also talked about the treatments she'd promised to arrange, asking when she'd be back with news about the transfers. Each conversation broke my heart a little more. I promised I'd find her and get answers. It was a promise I intended to keep, but not in the way he thought. Back at my apartment that night, I started making phone calls. Celeste's cell phone went straight to voicemail. The message was cheerful and bright. Hi, you've reached Celeste. I can't take your call right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you soon. The voice sounded happy, carefree, completely at odds with having a dying husband. I called the restaurant next. Their main line was answered by Tommy Rodriguez, their day manager, who sounded stressed and exhausted. Mrs. Calloway? Thank God you called. We've been trying to figure out what to do. Landon hasn't been in for 6 weeks, and Celeste said she was handling everything, but she hasn't been answering her phone either. What do you mean she was handling everything? She came in the day after Landon went to the hospital. October 4th, I think it was. She had some paperwork that gave her power of attorney over the business finances. Said Landon was very sick and she needed to make some financial decisions to cover medical expenses. My stomach dropped. What kind of financial decisions? Well, she transferred a bunch of money out of the business account. Said it was for experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. She also let most of the staff go, said we were downsizing temporarily while Landon got the treatment he needed. How much money? I'm not sure exactly, but it was a lot. Maybe $60,000 or $70,000. She also canceled our contracts with most of our suppliers, said we were going to be closed for several months while Landon recovered. This was getting worse by the minute. Did she say when they might reopen? She was vague about it. Just said she'd let us know when Landon was feeling better. But Mrs. Calloway, some of the vendors are asking about unpaid bills. Looks like she stopped paying them around the same time she emptied the accounts. I tried calling some of Landon and Celeste's mutual friends next. Most of them said they hadn't heard from either of them in weeks. A few mentioned that Celeste had been acting strange lately, canceling plans at the last minute and being vague about where she was spending her time. Jake Morrison, Landon's best friend since college, was particularly concerned. Mrs. C, I've been trying to reach both of them for over 2 weeks. Celeste told me Landon had food poisoning and couldn't come to the phone, but that was 3 weeks ago. I've left like 30 messages. When did you last actually see them? Maybe a month ago? We were supposed to have dinner 2 weeks ago, but Celeste canceled. Said Landon was working too much and needed to rest. But that didn't make sense because Tommy told me the restaurant had been closed. I hung up feeling sick. Every conversation revealed another lie, another person who'd been deceived about what was really happening. Then I remembered something. Back in March of 2023, when I'd helped Landon set up the restaurant's business accounts and get their finances organized, he'd added me as an emergency contact who could access account information in case something happened to both him and Celeste. He'd said it was Celeste's idea, that she thought it was smart to have a backup person who could handle things if they were both incapacitated. At the time, I'd thought it was responsible planning. Now I realized it might be the key to understanding what was really going on. At 11:47 p.m. on November 16th, I logged into their personal banking account from my laptop. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. The account that had held nearly $95,000 just 6 weeks ago was down to $312. But it wasn't the low balance that shocked me. It was the pattern of withdrawals. The account had been systematically drained, not all at once, but in careful, calculated withdrawals over the past 6 weeks. The same 6 weeks Landon had been in the hospital. $2,800 at a high-end salon in downtown Dallas on October 4th, $4,500 at a luxury clothing store called Pearson & Associates on October 7th, $1,200 at a fancy restaurant called Le Bernardin Dallas on October 10th. The charges went on and on. $900 at a day spa. $3,400 at something called Elite Jewelry Boutique. $800 at a wine shop that specialized in rare vintages. $6,200 at a high-end furniture store. $2,100 at a luxury car rental agency. All while my son was fighting for his life alone. But the biggest withdrawal made me physically sick. On October 15th, $47,000 had been transferred out of their account to something called Elite Event Planning Services. The memo line read, "Deposit for Freedom Celebration Event Package." She was throwing a party. While Landon was dying, Celeste was planning some kind of celebration. I clicked on the business account next. The restaurant account that should have had around $80,000 for operating expenses and payroll was completely empty. $0 There were withdrawals there too. $35,000 on October 5th, labeled medical consulting fees. $25,000 on October 8th, labeled specialist treatment deposit. $12,000 on October 12th, labeled pharmaceutical expenses. $8,000 on October 16th, labeled physical therapy equipment. None of it was real. Landon was in the ICU on life support. He wasn't getting specialist treatments or physical therapy. He wasn't taking expensive pharmaceuticals beyond what the hospital was providing. Celeste had stripped every penny from both accounts and used fake medical expenses to justify it. I stayed up all night going through every transaction, every charge, every withdrawal. I printed out bank statements, credit card bills, anything that showed the pattern of theft. By morning, I had a stack of papers 4 inches thick documenting Celeste's systematic betrayal. But I also had more questions than answers. Where was she? Who was she with? How long had she been planning this? The next morning, November 17th, I went back to the hospital. Landon was a little more alert, and the first thing he asked was whether I'd found Celeste. "Still working on it, honey," I lied, settling into the chair beside his bed. "Tell me about these treatments Celeste was researching. What did she tell you about them?" His face lit up with hope. "She said there's a clinic in Houston that's doing experimental immunotherapy. She was trying to get me accepted into their program. And there's another place in California that's had success with a new surgical technique." "Did she show you any paperwork about these treatments?" "She said she was handling all the paperwork, that I needed to focus on getting stronger for the treatments. She was so confident, so positive about everything. She said money was no object when it came to saving my life." "Tell me about this celebration you two were planning. The one with the event planner?"
Oh, that.
His face lit up with the first real smile I'd seen since arriving. "It was supposed to be a surprise party for when I beat this thing. Celeste was so sure I was going to recover. She said she wanted to have everything ready so we could celebrate the moment I got the all-clear from the doctors." My heart broke and my anger exploded at the same time. She'd used his hope, his desperate desire to believe he could beat cancer, to justify stealing their life savings. She said she'd already put down the deposit to make sure we got the best vendors.
The Four Seasons Ballroom, she said.
A live band, catering from that place we went for our anniversary. She wanted it to be perfect. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart." She was so excited about it. She said it would be the party of a lifetime, that everyone we cared about would be there to celebrate. She made me promise not to worry about the cost, said some things were worth going into debt for. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She'd convinced my dying son that she was planning a celebration of his recovery while actually preparing to celebrate his death. She kept saying she was going to call it a freedom celebration because I'd be free from cancer. Free to live the life we'd always dreamed of. I had to excuse myself and go to the bathroom to cry. The level of manipulation was staggering. When I returned, Landon was still talking about the future Celeste had painted for him. She said once I was better, we were going to travel, see the world, maybe sell the restaurant, and buy a house on the beach somewhere. She had it all planned out. Did she ever seem worried about the money for all this? She said not to worry about money. She said she'd figured out a way to cover everything. Something about business investments and insurance policies that would take care of us. More lies. The only investment she'd made was in her own luxury lifestyle. When I left the hospital that afternoon, I had a plan forming. Celeste wanted to play games?
Fine.
I'd been handling complex legal situations for 30 years as a corporate attorney. I dealt with fraudsters, embezzlers, and con artists. She had no idea who she was messing with. But I needed to be smart about this. I needed evidence, documentation, and a strategy that would expose her completely while protecting what was left of Landon's assets and ensuring she faced serious consequences. Step one was finding out exactly where she was and what she was doing. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Chun that same day. For $2,000, he promised to have a complete picture of Celeste's activities within 48 hours. I need to know where she's staying, who she's with, how she's spending her time, and how much money she's burning through, I told him. Any particular reason you think she's hiding something? She abandoned her dying husband in the ICU and robbed every penny from their accounts. I'd say that qualifies as hiding something. Marcus's expression darkened. I'll get you everything you need, ma'am. This kind of thing, it makes me sick. Step two was protecting what was left of Landon's assets. I called his bank the next morning and explained the situation. Since I was listed as an emergency contact on both the personal and business accounts, they agreed to freeze all transactions pending an investigation into potential fraud. Mrs. Calloway, this looks like a textbook case of financial exploitation, the bank manager, Sandra Phillips, told me during our phone call. We're implementing an immediate hold on all cards and electronic access. If someone tries to use any of these accounts, we'll be notified immediately. By 5 p.m. on November 17th, every card connected to those accounts was dead. If Celeste tried to spend another penny of Landon's money, she'd find out very quickly that her party was over. Step 3 was the most important part. I needed evidence of what Celeste had been doing, and I needed to understand the full scope of her betrayal. Had this been a crime of opportunity, or had she been planning it for months? Marcus called me at 9:23 a.m. on November 18th with information that made my stomach turn.
Found her, he said.
She's staying at the Four Seasons in downtown Dallas. Presidential suite, $3,200 a night. Been there since October 4th, the day after your son was admitted to the hospital. You're sure? Absolutely. Room 2847. I have photos of her coming and going. And Mrs. Calloway? She's not alone. There's a man with her. Derek Ashworth, 34 years old, works in real estate development. They've been seen together multiple times, acting very much like a couple. The Four Seasons presidential suite. Of course. Nothing but the best when you're spending someone else's money. How long do you think they've been involved? That's the interesting part. I did some digging, and this isn't a new relationship. I found evidence that they've been seeing each other since at least April of 2023. Maybe longer. April 2023. 8 months before Landon got sick. She'd been planning this betrayal for a very long time. I need you to keep watching them. Document everything. Where they go, what they do, how much they're spending. I also need you to dig deeper into their relationship. I want to know exactly how long this has been going on and whether Derek was involved in planning the theft. What's your budget for this? Whatever it takes to get the truth. Over the next several days, Marcus provided me with a detailed picture of Celeste's activities that was even worse than I'd imagined. She and Derek were living like royalty on Landon's money. Expensive dinners every night at restaurants that charged $400 per person. Shopping trips to designer stores where they dropped thousands of dollars on clothes and jewelry. Spa treatments that cost more than most people's monthly rent. They'd rented a luxury BMW for $800 a day. They were taking helicopter tours of Dallas for $1,200 a trip. They'd bought matching Rolex watches for $15,000 each. But Marcus also uncovered the timeline of their relationship, and it painted a picture of calculated, long-term betrayal. Mrs. Calloway, I found Derek's ex-girlfriend, woman named Ashley Torres. She was willing to talk, and what she told me is pretty damning. What did she say? Derek broke up with her in March of 2023, right around the time he started seeing Celeste. Ashley said Derek told her he'd met someone who was going to change his life and that he'd found his ticket to the good life. Did he specifically mention money? According to Ashley, Derek bragged about Celeste's husband being loaded and said the restaurant was a gold mine. He also mentioned that Celeste was unhappy in her marriage and looking for a way out. The pieces were falling into place. This hadn't been a spontaneous affair or a crime of opportunity. Derek and Celeste had been planning to steal Landon's money and run off together for months, possibly even before Landon got sick. There's more, Marcus continued. I found hotel receipts showing that Derek and Celeste were meeting regularly at various hotels around Dallas starting in April 2023. They were careful to use different places, probably to avoid being seen together. How many hotels? At least 12 different locations over 8 months. Always paid for in cash initially, probably to avoid leaving a paper trail on credit cards that Landon might see. I felt sick. While Landon had been working 18-hour days to build their restaurant into a success, Celeste had been planning his betrayal. While he'd been telling me how grateful he was to have found someone who believed in him, she'd been plotting to steal everything he'd worked for. Marcus, I need one more thing. I need you to find out about this party they're planning. The one she paid Elite Event Planning $47,000 for. I'll get right on it. The answer came back the next day, and it was the final piece of evidence I needed to understand just how cruel and calculated Celeste really was. Mrs. Calloway, I spoke to someone at Elite Event Planning. The party is scheduled for December 1st. It's called a Freedom Celebration, and it's supposed to be for 200 guests. Freedom Celebration? According to the event planner, Celeste described it as a party to celebrate the beginning of her new life and freedom from everything that was holding her back. She specifically requested that the invitation say, "Come celebrate true freedom." She was literally planning to celebrate Landon's death. While he lay dying in the hospital, asking for her every day, she was planning a party to celebrate being free of him. But here's the really sick part, Marcus continued. I managed to get a copy of the guest list. It includes most of their mutual friends, people from the restaurant, even some of Landon's family members. She was planning to tell everyone that the party was to celebrate Landon's recovery, but the real theme was celebrating his death. She was going to lie to the guests. Looks like it. The invitations were supposed to go out the day after the funeral. I spent every day at the hospital with Landon, watching him get weaker while pretending I was still searching for his wife. Each day was harder than the last. He would drift in and out of consciousness, and whenever he was awake, the first thing he'd ask about was Celeste. On November 22nd, Dr. Martinez pulled me aside with an update on Landon's condition. Mrs. Calloway, I need to prepare you. Your son's condition is deteriorating rapidly. The cancer has spread to his liver and his lungs. He probably has less than a week left. Is he in pain? We're managing his pain as best we can, but I won't lie to you. This is a difficult way to die. The good news is that he seems to be finding some peace with his situation. What do you mean? Yesterday, he asked me to be completely honest about his prognosis. I think he's starting to accept that the treatments his wife promised aren't going to materialize. Can I stay with him around the clock? Of course. I think that would be a great comfort to him. That afternoon, Landon had what Dr. Martinez called a rally day. He was more alert than he'd been since I arrived, and we talked for almost 4 hours. He told me about his dreams for the restaurant, about the plans he and Celeste had made for their future, about how grateful he was for the life he'd built. But something had changed. He seemed less hopeful about recovery, more focused on making peace with his situation. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Anything, sweetheart. The doctors told me yesterday that I'm not going to get better, that there are no experimental treatments that can save me. Was Celeste lying to me about the specialists and the transfers? I looked at my beautiful, dying son, and I made a decision. He was going to die soon, and he deserved to know the truth about the woman he'd trusted with his life. Landon, there's something I need to tell you about Celeste. I told him everything. The empty bank accounts, the hotel suite, Derek, the months of deception, the party planned for December 1st. I watched his face change as the truth sank in, watched 30 years of love and trust crumble in real time. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Tears rolled down his cheeks, but his voice was steady when he finally spoke. How long do you think they've been planning this? At least 8 months. Maybe longer. So she knew I was sick before I was even diagnosed. I think so, yes. The timeline suggests she started planning this theft right around the time you would have started showing symptoms. He nodded slowly, processing the betrayal. She convinced me I was going to live, that there was hope. But she was planning my funeral party the whole time. I'm so sorry, honey. Mom, I need you to promise me something. Anything. I need you to make sure she doesn't get away with this. Not just the money. I need everyone to know what she did. I need her to face consequences for what she's done to me, to our friends, to everyone who trusted her. I promise. And Mom, I need you to know that none of this is your fault. You tried to warn me about her when we first got serious, remember? You said something felt off about her, that she seemed too interested in what I was earning. I remembered. Back in early 2022, when Landon had first introduced us to Celeste, I'd had a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. She'd been charming and sweet, but there was something calculated about it. Something that felt like performance rather than genuine emotion. When she'd learned that Landon owned the restaurant outright and had significant savings, her interest had become more intense. She'd started asking detailed questions about the business, about property values, about his investments. At the time, I'd told myself she was just being practical, that it was smart for a potential spouse to understand their partner's financial situation. But my instincts had been right. She'd been assessing his worth from the beginning. You were in love, honey. That's not a fault. Promise me you'll make her pay for this. Promise me everyone will know what kind of person she really is. I promise. He squeezed my hand with what little strength he had left. I love you, Mom. Thank you for being here. Thank you for telling me the truth. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. He died at 4:23 a.m. on November 25, 2024. I was holding his hand, just like I'd held it when he took his first breath 32 years earlier. The grief hit me like a physical blow. My son was gone, and the last months of his life had been poisoned by betrayal. But underneath the grief was something else, something cold and focused.
Rage. Pure, cristalline rage.
Celeste had robbed more than money. She'd stripped Landon's peace of mind in his final days. She'd stolen his ability to trust the person he loved most. She'd taken his dignity by letting him die alone while she celebrated with another man. And she was going to pay for every bit of it. The funeral was scheduled for November 29th. I made all the arrangements myself because Celeste was still officially missing. But I knew exactly where she was, and I had a plan that would expose her in the most public, humiliating way possible. I spent the days between Landon's death and his funeral preparing for war. First, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. Bank records showing the systematic theft. Credit card statements revealing the luxury spending. Business documents showing how she'd looted the restaurant accounts. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, shopping receipts, jewelry purchases, spa treatments, all paid for with money stolen from a dying man. I also collected evidence of her affair with Derek. Photos of them together at restaurants and hotels. Credit card receipts showing charges for 2 people when she claimed to be home caring for her sick husband. Phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between them while Landon was in the ICU. But the most damning evidence was the party. I had the contract with Elite Event Planning complete with details about the Freedom celebration scheduled for December 1st. I had emails between Celeste and the event planner discussing the menu, the decorations, the guest list. I had receipts for a custom cake that read, "To New Beginnings," and decorations with themes of freedom and fresh starts. She was planning to celebrate my son's death with 200 guests at a party that cost more than most people's annual salary. Second, I started making strategic phone calls to key people in Landon and Celeste's social circle. The first call was to Celeste's mother, Patricia Morrison, who lived in Houston. She answered on the second ring. "Patricia, this is Iris Calloway, Landon's mother." "Oh, Iris. How is Landon doing?" Celeste has been so worried, but she's been too emotional to talk to anyone. She's just devastated by his illness. "Actually, Patricia, Landon died 3 days ago." The gasp on the other end of the line was audible, followed by a long silence. "Oh my God. Oh, Iris, I'm so sorry. Where's Celeste? She must be completely falling apart." "That's interesting because I haven't been able to reach Celeste at all. Has she spoken to you recently?" "Well, no, but she told me a few weeks ago that she was staying at the hospital around the clock, that she barely left Landon's side. I just assumed she was too grief-stricken to call." "Patricia, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be very difficult to hear. Celeste hasn't been to the hospital once since Landon was admitted 6 weeks ago. She's been staying at a luxury hotel with another man, spending Landon's money while he died alone." The silence on the other end of the line lasted for almost a full minute. "That's impossible," Patricia finally whispered. "My daughter wouldn't do that. She loved Landon. I have proof. Photos, bank records, witness statements from hospital staff. Your daughter abandoned her dying husband to live it up with her boyfriend." I heard Patricia start crying. "Oh my God. Oh my God, Iris, I had no idea. I thought, when she said she was handling his medical expenses, I thought she meant she was paying for treatments." "She was paying for treatments, all right. Spa treatments, shopping treatments, luxury hotel treatments. For herself and her boyfriend. I don't understand. Where did I go wrong? How did I raise a daughter who could do something like this?" "Patricia, I need you to know that she's been lying to everyone. To you, to me, to Landon, to their friends. She's stolen over $175,000 and let a good man die alone while she planned a party to celebrate his death." "A party?" "She's spending $47,000 on something called a Freedom celebration, scheduled for December 1st. She's literally planning to celebrate being free of her dead husband." Patricia's sobs were heartbreaking. What kind of monster did I raise? "I need to ask you something, Patricia. Did you ever wonder how Celeste was affording her lifestyle? She's been spending money like it was water for months. She told me she'd inherited some money from her grandmother's estate. Said it came through right around the time Landon got sick, and it was helping them cover expenses." Another lie. Celeste's grandmother had died years ago and left her nothing but a small piece of jewelry. The second call was to Landon's best friend Jake, who had been his roommate in college and was supposed to be the best man at their original wedding. "Jake, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to trust me completely." "Anything, Mrs. C. How's Landon holding up?" "Jake, Landon died 3 days ago." The string of curses that followed was both heartfelt and creative. "But that's not the worst part," I continued. "His wife has been stealing his money and cheating on him while he was dying. She hasn't been to see him once since he was admitted to the hospital." "What do you mean she's been cheating on him?" "She's been living at the Four Seasons with another man for 6 weeks, spending Landon's money while he asked for her every day until he died." Jake's response was immediate and unprintable. "I need you to help me make sure everyone knows what kind of person she really is. Will you help me? Just tell me what you need. I'm going to confront her at the funeral. I need you and some of the other guys to make sure she can't leave until I'm finished. Consider it done." The third call was to Miranda Walsh, Celeste's best friend since college. I'd met Miranda several times at family gatherings, and she'd always seemed like a decent person who genuinely cared about Celeste. Miranda, this is Iris Calloway. I need to talk to you about Celeste. Oh, Mrs. Calloway, I'm so sorry about Landon. Celeste told me he was very sick, but she said the doctors were optimistic about his recovery. How is he doing? Landon died 3 days ago, Miranda. What? But Celeste said, she told me just last week that the doctors were hopeful that he was responding well to treatment. Celeste has been lying to everyone. She hasn't been taking care of Landon or even visiting him. She's been living at a hotel with another man, spending Landon's money while he died alone in the hospital. The conversation that followed was long and painful. Miranda had been receiving regular updates from Celeste for weeks, all of them lies. Celeste had told her that Landon was responding well to treatment, that the doctors were optimistic, that she was staying strong for both of them. I've been praying for them every day, Miranda whispered. I even organized a meal train for when Landon got out of the hospital. What else did she tell you? She said the medical bills were overwhelming, that insurance wasn't covering the experimental treatments. I sent money to help. How much money? $5,000. Celeste said they were behind on the mortgage and utilities because all their money was going to medical expenses. Another theft. Another lie. Another good person victimized by Celeste's greed. The fourth call was to Father Michael Santos at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, where the funeral would be held. Father Santos, this is Iris Calloway. I'm organizing the funeral service for my son Landon. Of course, Mrs.
Calloway.
I'm so sorry for your loss. Will Mrs. Morrison be involved in planning the service? That's actually what I'm calling about. I need to prepare you for something that might happen during the service. I explained the situation to Father Santos, who was shocked and saddened by what Celeste had done. Mrs. Calloway, are you planning to confront her publicly? Father, my son asked me to make sure everyone knows what she did. He didn't want her to get away with this. I understand your anger, but a funeral is a sacred space. Father, she robbed money from a dying man and abandoned him in his final days. She's planning a party to celebrate his death. If she has the audacity to show up at his funeral pretending to be a grieving widow, then she deserves whatever consequences come her way. Father Santos was quiet for a moment. What do you need from me? Just don't stop me when the time comes. By November 28th, the day before the funeral, I had contacted over 40 people in Landon and Celeste's circle. Friends, family members, business associates, neighbors, employees from the restaurant. Every single one of them had been lied to. Every single one of them had been told that Celeste was being the perfect, devoted wife. Several of them had even sent money to help with medical expenses that had actually funded Celeste's luxury lifestyle and affair. But I still hadn't confronted Celeste directly. I wanted her to show up at the funeral. I wanted her to walk into that church thinking she could play the grieving widow one last time. I wanted everyone who had ever trusted her to see her true face. And she didn't disappoint. On November 29th, 2024, at 2:15 p.m., 15 minutes after the funeral service had begun, Celeste Morrison walked into St. Matthew's Episcopal Church wearing a black designer dress that my son's money had paid for. Derek Ashworth was right beside her. They walked down the center aisle like they owned the place. Celeste was dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, making soft sobbing sounds that carried over the organ music. She was playing the part of the devastated widow to perfection. When she reached the front of the church, she threw herself dramatically over Landon's casket, wailing loud enough for everyone in the packed church to hear. "My poor, sweet husband," she cried. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you. I tried so hard to be strong for both of us." The performance was Oscar-worthy. Tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking with emotion, her body shaking with apparent grief. Several people in the congregation were crying along with her, moved by what they thought was genuine sorrow. That's when I stood up. "I'd like to say a few words about my son," I announced, walking to the front of the church. The pastor looked confused, but he stepped aside. I had prepared for this moment for days, and I was ready. Landon was a kind, trusting man who believed the best of everyone. I began, my voice carrying clearly through the church's sound system. Unfortunately, that trust was betrayed in the cruelest possible way by the person who should have protected him most. I pulled out a folder thick with documents. The same evidence I'd been gathering for weeks. While Landon was dying alone in the ICU, asking for his wife every day for 6 weeks, Celeste Morrison was living in a luxury hotel suite with another man. The gasps from the congregation were audible. I could see people shifting in their seats, craning their necks to get a better look at Celeste, who had gone completely pale. She robbed over $175,000 from Landon's personal and business accounts to fund her affair and her luxury lifestyle. I held up bank statements, hotel receipts, credit card bills. October 4th, $2,800 at Divine Beauty Salon. October 7th, $4,500 at Pearson & Associates Designer Clothing. October 10th, $1,200 at Le Bernardin Dallas Restaurant. All charged while my son was alone in the ICU. Celeste stood up, her face red with embarrassment and rage. "You can't do this. This is a funeral. You're lying." "Am I?" I pulled out printed bank statements. October 15th, $47,000 to Elite Event Planning for something called a Freedom Celebration. I looked directly at Miranda, who was sitting in the third row with tears streaming down her face. "Miranda, you sent $5,000 to help with medical expenses, didn't you?" Miranda nodded, unable to speak. "That money went to pay for the dress she's wearing right now and the jewelry around her neck." The church erupted in angry murmurs. People were standing up, pointing at Celeste, demanding explanations. "But that's not even the worst part," I continued. "This so-called Freedom Celebration is scheduled for December 1st, 2 days from now. A party to celebrate, and I quote from the contract, the beginning of her new life and freedom from everything that was holding her back." I held up the party contract for everyone to see. The silence in the church was deafening. She was planning to celebrate my son's death. While he lay dying, asking for her, she was planning a party with 200 guests to celebrate being free of him. Derek tried to slip out through a side door, but Jake and several of Landon's other friends had positioned themselves near all the exits. There was nowhere for either of them to go. "And this man," I said, gesturing to Derek, "has been living off my son's money for months while Landon fought cancer alone." I pulled out photos that Marcus had taken. These pictures show Celeste and Derek together at restaurants and hotels, spending Landon's money, while she told everyone she was home caring for her sick husband. Celeste was screaming now, but her words were drowned out by the angry voices of the congregation. People who had loved Landon, people who had trusted her, people who had been lied to and manipulated for months. She told her mother she was staying at the hospital around the clock. She told her friends that Landon was getting better. She told the restaurant employees that she was handling medical expenses. All lies. Every single word was a lie. I turned to address Celeste directly. "You abandoned your dying husband to play house with your boyfriend. You stripped his life savings to fund your affair. You let him die alone while you planned a party to celebrate his death." "That's not true," Celeste shrieked. "I loved him. I was trying to." "To what?" I cut her off. "To destroy him slowly? Because that's what you did." I pulled out my phone and played a recording that Marcus had managed to obtain from Derek's ex-girlfriend Ashley. It was a voicemail Celeste had left on Derek's phone that Ashley had recorded. "Don't worry about the money," Her voice came through the church speakers. He's not going to last much longer anyway. Once he's gone, we'll have everything we need to start over somewhere else. Freedom at last. The recording was damning. Her voice was cold, calculating, completely different from the grieving widow act she'd been putting on. The police are waiting in the parking lot, I announced calmly. They have warrants for both of your arrests. That part was true. I'd spent the morning providing evidence to the district attorney's office, and they'd agreed to arrest both Celeste and Derek on charges of theft, fraud, domestic abuse, financial exploitation, and conspiracy. As I finished speaking, Celeste turned to me one last time. "This isn't over, Iris," she snarled, her mask completely off now. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started." I looked at her calmly. "Actually, I think it is over. You're going to prison, Celeste. Your reputation is destroyed. Your family disowned you the moment I told them what you'd done. You have nothing left. I'll fight this. I'll prove you're lying." "With what?" "The evidence is overwhelming. Bank records don't lie. Hotel receipts don't lie. Recorded phone calls don't lie." As the congregation began to disperse to follow the drama outside, many people stayed to talk to me, to express their shock and outrage at what Celeste had done. Patricia Morrison, Celeste's mother, approached me with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Calloway, I am so deeply sorry. I had no idea what my daughter was capable of. When you told me on the phone, I didn't want to believe it, but seeing all this evidence..." "It's not your fault, Patricia. You raised her the best you could." "No, I failed somewhere. I must have failed to teach her basic human decency. What she did to Landon, to you, to everyone who trusted her, it's unforgivable. Have you spoken to her since I called you?" "I tried to call her after we talked, but her phone was disconnected. I drove to Dallas to find her, but when I went to her apartment, the neighbors said she hadn't been there in weeks. She was hiding at the Four Seasons with Derek." Patricia nodded sadly. "I want you to know that she's not welcome in our family anymore. What she did, there's no coming back from that." Jake came over next, his face grim but satisfied. "Mrs. C, the police arrested them both in the parking lot. Celeste was screaming about false accusations, but Derek just looked defeated. Thank you for helping today. Is there anything else I can do? Anything to help make this right? Just remember Landon the way he really was. Don't let her poison those memories." Miranda was crying so hard she could barely speak. "I gave her money. I actually gave money to help her celebrate Landon's death." "You gave money to help what you thought was a friend in need. That makes you a good person." "How did I not see it? How did none of us see what she really was? Because she's a very good liar. She fooled everyone, including Landon." The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. With all the evidence I'd gathered, Celeste's lawyers initially advised her to take a plea deal rather than risk a trial that would almost certainly result in a much harsher sentence. But Celeste was arrogant to the end. She insisted on going to trial, convinced that she could charm a jury the same way she'd charmed everyone else. She was wrong. The trial began on January 15th, 2025, and lasted 3 weeks. I testified on the first day, walking the jury through the timeline of Celeste's betrayal. I showed them the bank records, the hotel receipts, the photos of her spending Landon's money while he died alone. But the most damaging testimony came from Dr. Martinez, who explained how Landon had asked for his wife every single day until he died. He was confused and frightened, Dr. Martinez told the jury. He kept asking if something had happened to her, if she'd been in an accident. He was more worried about her safety than his own condition. It was heartbreaking to watch. The prosecutor played the recording of Celeste discussing Landon's impending death like it was a business opportunity. The jury's faces showed their disgust. Derek testified against Celeste in exchange for a reduced sentence, admitting that they'd been planning to steal Landon's money for months. She told me her husband was getting sicker and probably wouldn't last long, Derek said. She said once he was gone, we could take all his money and start fresh somewhere else. Did she ever express any sadness about her husband's condition?
No.
She seemed excited about it. She called it our ticket to freedom. She even started planning the party before he was officially diagnosed. Celeste's defense team tried to paint her as a grieving wife who had made poor decisions while under extreme stress. They claimed she'd been overwhelmed by Landon's illness and had acted irrationally. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The systematic nature of the theft, the months-long affair, the party planning, the lies to family and friends, it all pointed to calculated, premeditated betrayal. On February 7, 2025, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts. Celeste was convicted of theft, fraud, domestic abuse, financial exploitation, conspiracy, and abandonment resulting in death. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in prison with possibility of parole after 8 years, and ordered her to pay full restitution plus damages totaling $400,000. Derek received 5 years for his role as an accessory and conspiracy. But the legal punishment was only part of their downfall. The trial had been covered extensively by local and national media. Celeste's name became synonymous with betrayal and greed. Her photo was in newspapers and on television, identified as the woman who celebrated while her husband died. The story spread beyond Dallas. Social media exploded with outrage. Celeste became a cautionary tale about greed and betrayal. Her reputation was destroyed completely and permanently. The restaurant that Landon had worked so hard to build was sold to pay back some of the money she'd stolen. The house they'd shared was foreclosed on when the mortgage payment stopped. The BMW Derek had been driving was repossessed. Everything they'd built their luxury lifestyle on vanished overnight. Celeste's family disowned her completely. Her mother, Patricia, published a statement in the local newspaper condemning her daughter's actions and expressing sympathy for Landon and our family. Friends who had trusted her, who had sent money to help with medical expenses, publicly denounced her on social media. Some of them organized a support group for people who had been victimized by her lies. Derek lost his real estate license and his job. His own family cut ties with him after learning what he'd done. The Four Seasons suite became a jail cell. The designer clothes became a prison uniform. The luxury lifestyle became a memory. On the first anniversary of Landon's death, November 25, 2025, I received a letter from Celeste in prison. It was 8 pages long, filled with apologies, excuses, and pleas for forgiveness. She claimed she'd been confused and overwhelmed by Landon's illness. She said she'd never meant for things to go so far. She begged me to understand that she'd always loved Landon and had never wanted to hurt him. She asked me to write a letter to the parole board supporting her early release. She promised she'd changed, that prison had made her realize how wrong she'd been. She said she thought about Landon every day and missed him terribly. Every word was a lie, just like everything else that had ever come out of her mouth. I read the entire letter twice, then threw it in the trash without responding. Instead, I went to Landon's grave and told him that I'd kept my promise. Everyone knew what she'd done. She'd lost everything, just like she'd cost him everything. The money that was recovered went partly to paying back the people she defrauded and partly to covering Landon's medical bills. The rest went into a fund I'd established in his memory to help families dealing with similar situations. But more importantly, justice had been served. Completely and publicly. 3 years later, I heard through mutual friends that Celeste had been denied parole. She was still working in the prison laundry, still living in a 6x8 cell, still paying for what she'd done to my son. Derek had been released and was working construction, living in a trailer park, completely broke and unemployable in his chosen field. The life she'd tried to build on my son's suffering had crumbled completely, and they were both exactly where they belonged. People sometimes ask me if I feel bad about destroying her life, if I think my revenge went too far, if I ever consider forgiveness. The answer is always no. People call it revenge. I call it justice. Celeste made her choices. She chose to abandon a dying man who loved her. She chose to steal his money to fund an affair. She chose to let him die alone while she celebrated her freedom. She chose to lie to everyone who cared about them. She chose to plan a party to celebrate his death. I simply made sure she faced the consequences of those choices. Landon died alone because of her selfishness and cruelty. She deserved to lose everything because of her betrayal. And every time I think about that night in the hospital, holding my son's hand as he took his last breath, asking me to make sure she didn't get away with it, I know I did exactly what needed to be done. She wanted to celebrate while he died. Instead, she lost everything while his memory lives on in the hearts of people who truly loved him. That's not revenge. That's justice. And sometimes, justice looks like a woman in handcuffs being led out of her husband's funeral while 200 people who trusted her watch her fall. Sometimes, justice looks like 15 years in prison and a reputation destroyed forever. Sometimes, justice looks like losing everything you stole and everything you thought you'd gained. Celeste Morrison wanted to be free. Now she's free, free from money, free from respect, free from family, free from friends, free from any hope of a decent life. She got exactly what she asked for. And I sleep peacefully every night knowing that my son's final request was fulfilled completely. Justice served. Promise kept. Case closed. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think about Iris's decision. Was her approach justified, or do you think she should have handled things differently? I love hearing your thoughts on these complex situations. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We share powerful true stories like this every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Hit that bell icon so you get notified the moment we upload, and please share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of standing up for what's right, even when the whole world feels like it's falling apart. If you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. Thanks for being part of our Her Real Stories family. I'll see you in the next one.